All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on this very sunny day in London, actually. I'm very happy. So, yes, thank you very much. My name is Nimrod Vadi. I'm the founder and creative director at Arbeit Gallery, based in East London. If you haven't visited us, please do come around. We have a great show on by Ben Grosser at the moment. Arbeit is a gallery, a non-for-profit gallery that commissions artists working in the intersection of digital practice, new technologies, and critical thinking. In 2020, we've launched our Arbeit Skills that offers introductions to creative software and short course classes on digital theory led by artists and curators working in the digital realm. So far, we've done workshops on coding, 3D designing, sound editing, as well as cross-platform game engines and virtual world making. These creative courses were made to fill a gap we saw for short but in-depth peer-to-peer learning, something in between of a YouTube tutorial and university short course, all via a supportive network of like-minded people. The courses are always small, which gives participants a chance to receive more personal and hands-on approach in more friendly and engaging environment. The aim of the workshops is for participants to live with skills they can apply in their creative development. We're welcoming you to the third and final workshop that we programmed in collaboration with the Serpentine as part of their second iteration of future art ecosystems. And this time is with Keiken. Keiken are a cross-dimensional collaborative practice whose practice merges the physical with the digital by building online worlds and augmented realities for you to experience, often through face filters hosted on Instagram. And today they will be taking you through some exciting workflows of character design and implementation within your own 3D worlds. We also have Eva Mieger is here with us today, and she's from Serpentine. We'll share a bit more about the future art ecosystems.
So yeah, I'm Eva Yeager. I'm associate curator at Serpentine Galleries, where I work on the R&D platform team. It's an initiative to operationalize research, specifically artistic research within the art field. We're also producers of Future Art Ecosystems, which is an annual strategic briefing. The idea behind this work is to provide concepts, references, a kind of language, and a series of arguments that can be integrated into operational agendas for cultural infrastructure. On July 6th, the team, along with so many amazing contributors, including Keiken, published second issue of Future Art Ecosystem, which focused on art in the metaverse. So we were interested in how metaverse infrastructures might interface with the art world. And for those of you who are less familiar with the term, it's an always online, persistent, spatial second world. Some people call it Web 3.0, which represents a fundamental shift in our notion of digital systems and presence, and it will require new skills in order to grasp its implications. I'll drop a link to the PDF of the report in the chat. So as part of our exploration of this and focusing on these sort of operational agendas, we wanted to make sure we provided something for artists. And that's this series of technical workshops focused on art making in the metaverse. So in our session with Danielle, we learned to sort of develop the structural foundation of a game. So who we're making the game for, how it would be, how the viewer would be or player would be brought into the game, what the tools for interaction would be. In our second session, we moved into the game engine, exploring dynamic environments in Unity with Chris McGinnis. And then today, our final session with Keiken, they'll walk us through building characters who might inhabit the environments that we make in Unreal Engine. So I'm really looking forward to this session, and I don't want to take up any more time, so I'll hand it over to Tanya.
Hi everyone. So how we are going to start is we thought we'd spend the first like 30 minutes or something talking a bit about like our what we make, so you understand our practice a little bit, and like what angle we're coming from, and then we'll explain character design, and also just like kind of the certain like I guess like along the way, the learning processes and the way how we discovered to create character design, because we really do feel like it's like an ongoing process. So it's like you can see like where like when we don't know how to do something, how we've like done a trick to make it feel like you've done that when you haven't, or something like that. And then we'll also actually take you through how to create virtual production, so like how to basically make a CGI film. So just dissect the process for you, and then we'll go into the character design and show you how to make a metahuman, how to bring it into the gaming engine, and then also how to export it as a film. So we're Keiken. So we create gamified experiences, and our work is really like focusing on like how to care for and how to like understand and critique and explore the metaverse. And I guess like we do this in like we create it in lots of different forms. So we create gamified performances, we create films, games, and we use a lot of XR technology. So we use like AR, VR, but we also create our own technologies or work with startups to develop their technologies. So it's kind of like lots of different things, but when you're working collaboratively, you end up going in lots of directions inevitably, because you need to fulfill everyone's needs.
I was just going to add as well, like it's me and Hannah and Izzy, who Izzy isn't here with us today, but she's here in spirit. But yeah, like we were saying, we always collaborate with many different people from many different fields, and almost all of our projects are never without collaborating with someone else. So that's something that's really important to our practice and our process,
especially with character design too, because a lot of for us, like once we started doing CGI, like we made that very like deliberate decision of like, we realized the weight of like what happens when you create a digital identity, and like what is like the weight and the value of that. Like how do you make it emancipatory? How do you portray people's inner worlds in a more accurate way? Like how do you liberate people? How do you not continue or perpetuate some systems or something and stuff like that? So we're really like, we do feel like quite a like responsibility. So often the characters we're working with are with other people, and we're working with them and like nurturing our like collaboration to get to the point that we all really create this character, and we like symbolize and evoke them the way that they feel comfortable and happy with. We'll just show you a couple of works that we've been working on recently.
Page are just kind of like works that we've just kind of really like launched, or not launched, maybe just like made physical, and also like projects that are kind of still in process at the moment. So the video that Hannah's just started playing in the top right hand corner is just from our recent installation at HEC in Basel, where we created a game that you can play. So it was originally a game that you can play online. So later on we can actually share the link so you guys can have that and you can play it if you want to. But we actually, for this exhibition, we kind of transformed it from an online game into a game that can be played physically in space. So if you see in the top left-hand corner image, you can see there's a big projection, and then in front there's this pool of water which actually really beautifully like reflects the projection into it. So and then there's this kind of raised platform above the water where visitors of the gallery can come and sit down, and you can see that the person in the image is actually interacting with something on the screen, and that's actually an iPad which we've used as a kind of controller or kind of like a trackpad, so that you can interact with the game from the seating area. So the game is actually a multiple choice walking narrative game. So you kind of have to go through each level, and then you're confronted with these different kind of like narrative choices, and you have to choose in which direction you take. So there's like whether you choose the direction of the moral high horse, or the human god, or to become a divine mother. So while you're playing the game, you don't actually really know which direction you're taking, but you can kind of follow along with it. You can see in the bottom of the projection there's actually a little map. So the purpose of the game, or kind of like one of the main things that happens during the game, is you collect these wisdom tokens. And so every time you reach a new level, or where there's a new environment, there's new symbology, there's new characters, maybe, you'll be collecting these wisdom tokens. And what we made available in the physical installation is that you can actually download your wisdom tokens via a generative QR code, and you can take those wisdom tokens away with you. So you can keep them, and you can see their details, see their values, see their traits.
I guess so. Like what we were doing with it was that we made this game in April. Like it was released, I think, the 1st of April. So it's very much the height of when NFTs, non-fungible tokens, were released, and also with like obviously the blockchain becoming more within the mainstream. And one thing that for us we were really reflecting on was the idea that non-fungible token, what that means is that it's like an asset that is like, it's unique. So what we were really thinking, and that now it can be like it can be integrated into society as something valuable that's like maybe something that's more ephemeral, for example, like digital works. But for us, what was really important was these tokens were called wisdom tokens. So the idea is almost like kind of a bit like, it feels a bit like Pokemon. It has like a poster of all the different tokens you can collect. The idea was like, how could you like potentially implement wisdom onto the blockchain as a form of currency? So like what happens in the future if we have something like the blockchain, and we can basically kind of change the kind of like the game of the earth. So like what do we do on the, like we exchange through finance and through money, and that creates a certain system, it creates certain values and certain like it perpetuates certain like modes of power. So our idea was like really thinking about, well, what happens if we could implement stuff like wisdom? What happens if we could put the wisdom of our ancestors onto the blockchain, and that could be used as a form of currency, but obviously it's like an all non-fungible token, and how would that change our systems and the game that we're playing ultimately? So that's really what we were trying to explore, and also propose in that very like kind of explosive time where people like it, like the blockchain is engineered finance, like that's what it is. It's all about finance. So it's like for us, that's like we're stepping back from that and like thinking of a new way of operating in that on the blockchain in a like a emancipatory way. And then down below you can see there's also, this is an install that's going to happen in the next month at Thailand Biennale, and that this is just like, as you play the game, there'll be the map as a sculpture, and as you play the game you can track where you're going. So and then a couple of other pieces we've been working on is just, we created this series called the Life Game, and that one is like, again, a touchpad controller, but it has implemented reward systems as you watch the interactive series, very similar to Twitch. And again, it's like looking at these technologies that are actually, they're really seeping into our day-to-day, and also like the younger generation, for example, like Twitch and even Instagram now, they're like creating reward systems. And like, I don't know if you know, like when like Sapiens happened, the book Sapiens came out, and there's Yuval Noah Harari, and he was talking a lot about narratives, and everyone, like, it's a very general like thing to now say that the narratives like shape, like we need to believe in narratives, and that shapes the way we think and feel and believe, and we need them to guide us in society. But actually we need game structures too to guide us in society. So we're looking at the ones that are existing and starting to seep into society, and like kind of commentating on that. And then the last piece that we're working on at the moment, which is like a haptic room, which we can show you more about in later, but that room is a basically it's a wearable technology, and inside it has like sound and haptics. And what's really amazing about this technology we're creating is that when you're wearing it, it feels like the sound comes from inside you. So what happens is that when you it's kind of a great simulator for creating like first-hand experiences. So you can implement an experience that's not your own, and then you can and then it feels like you are embodying that experience as if it's someone else's experiences going inside you from the first-hand perspective, if you get what I mean. maybe we can go to the next one.
Yeah, I think so.
It's just a few of our installations.
Yeah, so we thought we'd just like briefly show you some of the things that we often do, kind of like multi-channel video installations, but like this, sometimes they'll have like an augmented reality counterpart, like that's quite important to the work, or like with this work that is on the screen now in the previous image, we actually we screened a film that we made called Film and Metaverse, and then kind of seamlessly transitioning from that film screening, we went into a live motion capture performance, which is really just like a very gamified performance, because it really required a lot of like audience participation and like audience collaboration as well. So we created this controller, which was actually like a website that the audience could visit on their phone. So it was, the URL is yourcontroller.live, which is actually still active. Like you won't be able to actually interact with the game because the game was the live, but you can actually kind of have a little play with it anyway. But oh, sorry, did you want to say something?
Oh no, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say, so the purpose of the controller was really very simple. It only had a few interactions. So the game had 6 levels, and each level required the audience to actively press a button multiple times. So each time you press the button, a soundscape would come out of your phone, maybe for 5-10 seconds or so. And so as everybody in the space is pressing the buttons, it creates this like reactive audio landscape in the actual space. And because people are pressing constantly, it really kind of creates this kind of like building of energy and like sound in the room. And the interactivity is that when you press the button, it actually activates and triggered changes in the virtual environment. So you can kind of see in the background there's kind of like some embers and there's a waterfall and some trees. But depending on which level you were in, your collective participation would actually, for example, cause a forest to grow, or maybe in the next level, all of your pressing the button actually causes a forest fire, which destroys the forest. And then you have to work together in the next level to press the button to kind of like extinguish the fire. So really, oh sorry, you go.
I was gonna say like maybe more like bit of the conceptually,
Yeah.
like what that meant. So like for example, when Tanya was saying about the one level you're pressing the button and you create a forest, and the other level the forest burns, and it's almost like how, especially online, it's like how our micro actions can create macro impact. So 1 minute you're doing something that you feel like is positive, and then the next second you as the audience are like kind of like without even realizing something bad happens, and then you feel like collectively like responsible of that. So it kind of allows people to think about like micro actions and macro impact, and in that relationship to technology and also nature and the environment. And then here's like another motion capture performance where we screen film my metaverse at the ICA, and it seamlessly went into a interactive 360 live stream performance, which we worked with Offworld to debut their technology for the first time. So when they were starting with their plugin for Unreal Engine, we were kind of their guinea pigs. So what we'd do is we'd propose what we wanted, the tools they wanted to create to develop their technology, and then they'd develop it. And by doing that, they would it would help develop their overall product. And what we did was that this stream is actually the stream from the gaming engine, which is also streamed onto Facebook at the same time as a 360 video. And people go onto Instagram and they could press the emojis. And if you can see at the top here, you can see the emojis, and they're filling up as the more people press those emojis. And once it's fully full, then an interaction will appear. So what happens is it's almost like, again, like collective world building to make changes. There will be no change in the environment if nobody participates. But what was also good is that, or interesting, was that, for example, we had someone from like Marrakesh who was playing at the same time, who wasn't in that space. But so it's kind of like, again, playing with these like, I guess we're just really experimenting with what could we do with these different tools and technologies, to discover our own technologies. Do you want to
if
say
we go on the next slide, you can actually see like yeah, it was so on Facebook you can kind of see, you can press the different like interactions like life or heart or, and each of those, yeah, it just like activated something in the environment. So yeah, it really was, like Hannah was saying, just experimenting with this like very fledgling technology and trying to see what we could do in a space with people virtually and physically.
And again, I guess maybe like Facebook is something for like online communities, but then this is like a phygital kind of community building in like a strained way, using like, I don't know, like using something that's very corporate, but then also there was a lot of like freedom within that space. So for example, when Sakina was in the motion captures, like she's moving so fluidly, like you can't move within a digital space like normally so fluidly. So yeah, and also just like live, like the future of like how we interact with live visuals and performances and events. Then now this is like, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about like avatars and like how we create our avatars. So this was a performance we did in November with Nama Ital, and also her baby in her womb. So Yanni, Yanni inside her womb. So here you can see. And so what we did was we just like, I guess we actually just did a call out and asked if anyone was pregnant and wanted to perform with us. And so Nam was like, yay, me. And I'm like, okay, cool. It was really nice, actually. It was really like, we connected so fast.
Yeah, it's really organic.
And so we asked her, like, we kind of told her, like, what technologies would you, this is how we can use the technology. So for example, you can be attached to like multiple characters. So what would you like to do? And she said that she wanted to bring back, she said that her grandma's always there in her presence. So we decided to do a bit of a Kanye and bring her grandmother back to life. Which we could maybe explore the ethics of that. I feel like it's with consent. It's her grandmother. And then we also created her present self, and then we created like her, we call it Bambi, so it's like a future kind of non-human, but also thinking about the future of Yanni too. Yeah. And it was almost like a ritual performance, which again, like I guess like some of it is also thinking of like ancestors and technology. And,
yeah, because Nama's history, or like Nama's kind of like context at the time of this performance especially, was that she was so she's actually she's Israeli and she's Jewish, and her family were actually from I think both from Austria and Germany. They obviously fled during World War II, and she grew up in Israel, and then eventually she moved to Austria to study, and then now she lives in Berlin. And at that point she was pregnant, and she kind of felt like she'd, in some way through her ancestry, she'd come full cycle back to her roots almost. And so part of this world that we created with her was something, this space that was really kind of very like deeply personal to her, and one that is beautiful, but actually it also was there as in kind of an effort to communicate to her future child like the complexities of the world and how everything is not always like good, basically. So yeah, maybe we can play a bit of, well, kind of,
yeah. So Nama also sings a lullaby that her mum used to, in Hebrew, that her mum used to sing to her as a child. So what we're going to do now is like, so we're going to show you like and talk about like how we started with CGI and maybe some of the ways in which we got to certain points. And so this is almost like, how do you develop a character before you've even made the character in CGI? And like, what are the certain things that you might like get stuck on, but how you can overcome those, overcome any of those like things. So like what we were going to show you was like the trailer to Film My Metaverse, which was the film that we created in 2019. It was the first CGI film we made. So you can kind of see the like aesthetic now to the aesthetic later on. So you can kind of see how the characters have actually developed, and also so that we can explain the virtual production later on, because we really want to show you, we think that like basically when you're creating a character, it's not just about making the character itself, it's often like it's like how everything comes together is so much to do with the character itself. So we want to be able to explain that so that you can, well, we felt like this was one of the most valuable things for us when we were learning the process. As soon as we understood this, we were like, oh my God, like we have
if only, yeah. And also kind of in a way, like if only we'd known so many things at the beginning, that would have kind of prevented a lot of like trauma with CGI.
CGI trauma.
Yeah.
CGI. You can hear it, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to be responsible of so many lives. I have a molecular and cosmic responsibility. I have roots.
I've been thinking about how apples became extinct on base reality.
Why do you think that is?
In Palm, you can only take one bite, and then you have to throw it away.
Throw away what?
Actually, I can stop here. So like, for example, in this bit, so at the time, like if you can see, like none of the faces like move at all. And I'll also show you another bit. So when we first started doing character design, we basically decided to work with form capture, which they're really, really, really lovely. But what we realized is basically we did a scan of their faces, because we wanted we didn't know, how do we create somebody's real face? Like, how do we replicate that? So what we did was we did a scan, but the problem with that is it costs so much to rig it, and it's very hard to like rig it yourself. because
you end
think
up with
about how
just
many
like
muscles there are in your
Yeah.
face. So what we did was none of the characters really had any facial movements apart from the bald character, which was this one. And we had a reason why this one was a bald character, because it was conceptually part of it. But if you notice in this bit here, it's like we couldn't do that much motion capture because we didn't really know how to do it. So if you just rewatch this bit, it's like it goes to eat the apple. And what we've done is we just created a sound effect. So it's not actually at the apple. We've just hid the camera as if it looks like.
You've moved the camera and made it look as though, made it feel as though it's doing this, but actually kind of like hiding all the imperfections.
So it doesn't even look like it. It just like you're trying to mesmerize the people into the like surrealness and just move the camera around and evoke it. So like a lot of the time it's about not actually being able to do it. It's about being able to like fake it. So that but it is like about the emotional. It's like what is the essence of that?
How apples became extinct on base reality. Why do you think that is? In Palm, you can only take one bite, and then you have to throw it away.
Throw away what?
The apple, duh.
So that's the trader. So yeah, and then again here, so like again, like we said, the characters, we couldn't move their faces. Actually, maybe it's okay. So you can see actually here, you can also see, so what we've done is we needed to like, this was quite an emotional part of the film. So what we did was instead of making the character so that you can like, instead of making it so that we have the facial expressions, because we couldn't do that, we just moved. So instead of like, for example, if you want to do a nod and you don't have the animation for the facial animation for a nod, you just move the camera as if it's nodding. And then it will feel like it's nodding. So this is like an example of it, which this is really good to know, because like, for example, obviously we're going to teach you the metahumans, but you don't know what, you might decide, oh, I want it to look more non-human. So if you want to make it look more non-human, so for example, I think someone said they work with ZBrush. So what you could do if you want to animate your character, you don't need to animate your character to begin with. You could just film it as if you were making the facial expressions. Okay, see this bit? So can you just see that bit where it turns? That isn't the actual face moving or the head moving, that's the camera moving as if it's making that kind of expression.
Yeah, I guess we just wanted to share some of the hacks that we had to come up with from the beginning of our like understanding of virtual production and character creation, because I think when you're first starting out, there can be so much to learn. It can be quite overwhelming, even just understanding what basic kind of elements are, like rigging, for example. We just had no idea of what that was. But yeah, we wanted to show that it's still like really possible to create these really emotive scenes with very kind of little.
And then also we just wanted to share with you just like a small, like, I guess part of making the film was like obviously picking the characters and making sure they were like, you're really developing a relationship with whoever. If you're going to use somebody's identity that's not your own, like what are the implications of that? And also like, is it based off someone you know? And if so, what is their story, or how can that technology be used in an emancipatory way? So for example, Linda and Sakima, Roka and Sakima Crook. So Sakima played Pando, which is, they had multiple avatars, and then Linda played O, which is this avatar. And with what was really beautiful about their relationship together was that so Sakima's trained as a professional dancer and is an activist and a model, and then Linda used to be a professional dancer, and she's Italian. She moved to London when she was 17, 18 or something, and she pretty much performed like everywhere. She was like really successful, and then suddenly when she was 19 she woke up and she just couldn't move her body, and she has this rare disease where like basically she was in hospital I think for 6 months, but she it's like a it's like she still has it, but it definitely is so basically what happened was that she hadn't actually danced since it happened, and that was 10, so when we were working with her it was like 10 years later, and this is the first time she danced with Sakima, and she was mirroring Sakima. So Sakima was like was there guiding her and helping her like feel comfortable and safe, and then we recorded her motion capture in a motion capture studio. So one of the things that we did when we first started was we actually worked with Target 3D, which is a motion capture studio, and that was super helpful because having someone who understands motion capture, who's really, especially like if you tell them like, oh, I'm doing this project, like blah blah, and if it's for good reasons and it's for something that is like, yeah, for the good reasons, I think like often like that would like
they're willing to help you,
yeah, or like
how they can, yeah.
Yeah, or like even just asking questions, because even like having that experience really helped form like our understanding of motion capture, because we could ask a professional. And this is the and then also just like studying people's form is another thing that's really important to us. So like when we did the performance, we worked with Sakima to also, when we did the film My Metaverse, we also did a live performance. And like one thing that's really important to us is actually just studying form and studying someone else's practice to understand the body and how it
and
works.
making sure that there's space for them in the collaboration as well, like we really nurture each other's kind of interests and like what we'd like to do. So
and
yeah,
and this is more just like learning through performance to create the motion capture. And also again, this is the haptic room, so like understanding the architecture of room and working with technologies to like develop an understanding of the inner world and the body to get to the point that we we understand. This is Izzy, by the way, she's here and
just having a little nap.
Really enjoying it. It's so comfortable. That haptic room is really nice. And then here's some of the CGI we've been doing more recently, which isn't in it's not done through Metahumans, it's done through Character Creator, but that's using a paid software. It's very similar, like the outcome that you can make is very similar to the Metahumans.
Yeah, I would say there's like between like both Metahumans as a character creation software and Character Creator, which is a real illusion software. They both are like, you can have really amazing outputs, but actually there's a lot of limitations to both of them. That, like for example, with Metahumans, you can create an amazing high fidelity character for free, but actually we'll demonstrate this later, but you're actually very limited on body type, and actually you can only really stay within the bounds of like human forms. Whereas with Character Creator, there's a plugin that allows you to work with ZBrush, so we connect the two together, and that allows us to create like more non-human forms, more kind of like imagined bodies and bodily architectures as well. So yeah, there's really lots of different kind of like there's lots of different benefits to both. Like I would say actually that the metahuman interface, for example, is really intuitive, and that's like, it makes creating characters so easy and really fun. It's quite a like relaxing and enjoyable process, whereas in character creator it's a lot more like fiddly, time consuming. So yeah, but we'll go through that later. Yeah, we just wanted to kind of show you some of these.
Yeah, these are like heads and like characters, so we've like, you can kind of see that they're a bit like non-human. Again, also the hair, like using groom, which actually, so one thing that the Metahumans does for you, which is incredible, is it can create a groom if you have PC. So it will import a groom directly for you. But what groom does, which is really amazing, it creates a very realistic like textured hair, which is it is somewhat like revolutionary within character design, that now people use grooms rather than using like
hair cards or just like an object of a hair, which looks very, very static. Yeah, definitely.
It's a bit like hairdressing.
And you can also make the grooms inside of like software like Blender, for example. Like I've only ever used Blender to make a groom, and that's a free software, and it's actually not so difficult. There's lots of really great tutorials on how to do that and how to then bring that into Unreal and like animate it as a like movable dynamic object.
And another thing that you can also do in Unreal is you can create like post-processing effects. So this is a cell shader, so it turns the characters into anime. So what's really great is also like you can then add another effect to like change your character completely differently to a complete different like aesthetic if you want, through post-processing.
We can go through like our virtual production kind of, it's not timeline, I don't know, diagram. And then we'll shape it up a bit and we'll do something a bit more practical. But if anyone has any thoughts or questions or just wants to like say anything, like please feel free to. Don't wait for us. Don't wait until the end. Like we're really happy to answer questions as we go along.
Yeah. Are there actually any questions in the chat? Let's just see.
I don't think so. No. What was the cell shader from? So the cell shader is like a post-processing volume in Unreal. You can get them from the Epic Games Marketplace, like you can download pre-made ones, but it's actually not that complicated to make. I mean, actually, Hannah, you can speak, but you can say that because I didn't make it.
Yeah, it's kind of like you. The thing is like it really depends what like computer you're wearing. You'll use it. I really live in I'm wearing a computer. But so like basically with a cell shader, it's like, so for example, if we were from a PC to a Mac, it's like when Tanya was sending me her cell shader, it wouldn't work the same way. So what's quite good is either you can do tutorials online to create your own using visual coding within Unreal, and you can create your own, or you find ones which you combine them, so you can add in multiple post processors and layer them, or you can find an existing one and you can try to like hack your way and like edit one. So that's also helpful, or you can download one. But that's the post processing within Unreal is really incredible. Like it's such you can basically change the lens, or
it's really powerful.
Yeah, or you can change the camera effects, whether that's like more post processing, like
and you can also do things like distortion. Like you can create kind of like a almost like if you had like a concave window or mirror like over it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Maybe so like
trying to recall them would be futile, as though Vaseline had been smeared all over my viewport. I thought to myself, this can change. So I created a technology which allows
like
us
that. That's the distortion.
Memories and dreams on our own terms.
Yeah, so
I name this technology Dreamtime Life Simulation.
So if you see, so basically, like, did you see that it was all like really blurry? That's the post processing. Like I just like coded a post processing like effect, and then this bubble is like a fisheye, but I've played around with the coding to like make it almost like a small bubble inside the so it's actually the camera lens doing that. which is also really great because what you can do then is you can save these post-processing effects and just import them into different projects. So you've always got like this kind of almost like array of different like potential like effects that you can add and layer on, and which is great also for your character design. Like you can see here, just you can like very much have one character but completely change its form through post-processing and just the environment itself or anything. So one thing that we think is so valuable when learning how to do CGI characters, because it's really not just about creating a character, it's like how do you make something like refined, how do you make something like how do you like make things make sense to not just yourself but to other people. So for us, this is like how we do virtual production. So it's very much based on the production of traditional production of filmmaking. And we thought that this will be like, this is to us like, if we had known this straight away, this would be the most helpful thing for us when we're making film.
Yeah, it really breaks down the process in a way that makes it really manageable for you, because you always kind of know what your output, like what the final form it wants to be, like if you want it to be a film or something. But actually it's quite a complex process, even if you're doing something quite simple. Like you always have to go through all of these stages, even to small degree.
Yeah, so even if you're like working with a character Metahuman, you're gonna have to do some of this process, even if it's a smaller video. So
yeah,
first thing is what you do is you just like, well, this is how we do it. You can obviously you can adapt it. It's not, this is a structure that as soon as you can like, you can just choose to not do it.
yeah, it's just, we thought it would be helpful. We can also share this Miro board with everyone afterwards, so you can just come back and look at it in your own time as well. But we'll just go over it to just outline everything really.
So this is how, so we start with like outline a concept. So like, what is our concept? What's the idea? Like, what is the framework of like what we're thinking about? And then we create like a production timeline and a budget. And then from there, we create a storyboard, a mood board, or a mood video. So this is really helpful depending on like how structured. So if you want to create a narrative that has sequences and is really like a film structure, a storyboard is really great, because a storyboard like allows you to create like a narrative sequence. Whereas a mood board, if you want something a bit more abstract in terms of like visual aesthetic, just creating a mood board to outline like how you visually want to perceive or see it or see the world come together. A mood video is really good. So you just literally take found footage or anything you want and you make a video, and you basically create the expression of you basically create the like emotional expression or the like pace or the like vibrations or feelings of what you imagine this piece to be. And that is a really helpful piece to like frame and have all your have everything ready so that you're ready to kind of go into the stages of making. And then you do the casting or location scouting, which can be digital or physical. So either you're scouting as in like online, you're finding characters, or physically you're trying to find people to work with to like create their characters or work with them, or you're trying to find like references of characters you want to build that may be non-human. And then with the location scouting, is like the idea is like you're finding what kind of environment you want to be working in, or you might be finding assets online on like say Unreal Marketplace, like assets you want to buy. And then the next stage is the art department, which is the like set design and the character design. And this is like the different ways in which you can do it. So this is what's really helpful, is to like know, don't do all of it from scratch, or like this is how we would advise. It's like, unless you want to spend ages, try to like, you can have like stages in which you learn things. So you don't have to be like, okay, there's a set design, so I need to model everything from scratch. Like that's not necessarily true. So you can either make your own, or you can kit bash it or alter existing objects, or you can code your own, or you can purchase existing objects. Then with the set design, so you're modeling the objects, your environment building, you're creating materials and textures, and often you'll can be working with like effects, for example, particle systems. Maybe you're bringing a video into the film, or you're making a post-processing effect for it that's very integral to like the set design of the space. A huge part of it often is the weather and the physics as well, because the difference, I guess, with you working in a gaming engine is that you're kind of working like literally the environment is a blank paper, and you're building from the sky and like maybe what weather it is, what time of day it is. Then with the character design, you're modeling the character, you're creating the hair, the makeup, you're styling the clothes, and you're creating the materials for it and the accessories. So with the styling and clothes, you can either design your clothes or pattern making, so something like Marvelous Designer, or you can use what's the other one?
That's like I forget the name of it, like Pro 3D.
Clothes 3D, yeah.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah, but that again, that's like in a way, that's like a whole other thing to learn while you're learning so many other things. So there are actually, you know, sometimes you might be able to find like existing digital clothes that are compatible with the type of character design that you're working with, which might make your process a bit simpler. And then you can just alter the material of that to make it more unique, so it doesn't look so bought, I guess. But then if you're making the clothes yourself, then you're designing the pattern in one of those like Marvelous Designer or Cruz, and then you're actually kind of creating the dynamics of it so it actually responds like a physical fabric would in real life. And then there's the process of kind of like rendering that out as an Alembic file, or you can bring it in directly and work with the physics in something like Unreal or even Character Creator do that.
And then like you can completely avoid that step if you just want to make it like more non-human. You just put a texture on the body. So there's like ways in which you can be like, okay, I'm not going to do this part this time, I'm going to go for this bit.
Yeah.
And then there's the animation. So the animation is really the characters, the models, and the sequencing. So with the characters, you need to have the body motion capture, the face motion capture, and the hand motion capture. And if you do body motion capture, you can probably the most simplest thing to start with might be you could just use Mixamo and just use an automatic rigging. So
so Mixamo is a free online library from Adobe, which has tons of like free animation, like already motion captured animation clips that you can download, and you can either like rig your character directly in Mixamo and then it will download the character again with the animation already included, or you can download a preset animation and retarget it in the software that you're working in. But it's honestly such a great resource and library, because even though we have access to a motion capture suite and we have facial motion capture and we have those things, actually it's not always that simple, and like you normally need 2 or 3 people with you to do the motion capture. So sometimes using the preset ones that are freely available makes your life so much easier. And I think if you're like doing a lot of CGI and you're doing a lot of character animation, you'll begin to recognize that everybody uses Mixamo as well, and you can kind of identify the exact animation clip they're using. So that's like kind of like 20%. Yeah, you know that's like insider knowledge, but it's also like comforting to know that like even not very very technically skilled people still use it. So it's yeah.
And then so you can
sorry, yeah, I was gonna say with for the body motion capture, there's several ways that you can do it. So you can rig the body manually and animate it quite like manually, which is not, I wouldn't recommend that route, to be honest.
So that's either in like Blender or Cinema, you just create your own bones, which some of you might have already done, which is great for also like objects, I guess. Like that could be really, or if you want to create something like a really non-human movement, that's more simple, that can be really
sure, yeah.
Manually. And then there's also you can do it through AI, so you can use Deep Motion, which is also a free software. Still free, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it's still free. I think there's just a limit to how much you can download in one go. I think But that's pretty great because you can just take a video of someone moving in front of like a white wall, make sure the camera is really static, and then you upload that onto their like browser-based kind of plugin, and it will just rig a character for you. And similarly to Nextmo, you can either download the animated skeleton directly, or you can rig it to a character in Deep Motion. But that's also a great tool, and like I think sometimes for us the results aren't as like polished as we'd like them to be, but that's often when we're working with a very humanoid looking character. But if you are working with a character that it isn't so human, you can really like that kind of like level of detail you can actually sacrifice, because it doesn't affect what you're showing so much. And then with the facial motion capture, which we'll show you today, you can actually just use like an iPhone. I think there is like availability, like capabilities to do it on Android as well, but we've personally never worked with that. I wouldn't rule it out, but yeah, it's very like, I think with iPhone it's actually a lot. I mean, they've interfaced everything, so it's a lot smoother for you if you're just starting out, for example. It's less hacky that way, or less like technical. And then for the same with hand motion capture, there's a little device that you can get that tracks your hand movements, and then but like the face and hand, you can also do them manually. But all of those aspects of body motion, facial motion capture, and hand motion capture, there's these stages that you can break it down into. So that's rehearsal, so figuring out what the movements are, figuring out how the movements you want to do, whether they actually work with motion capture or not. Then a big problem that we've experienced with motion capture before is calibration. And if your suit is not calibrated correctly, then it will really create awful data that's like impossible to work with. So getting calibration right at the very beginning is really essential. Then you figure out your animation score and you record it, and then you get to the stage where you can actually clean up the motion capture data. And that's a really normal part of mocap. It's quite icky maybe, and maybe not something that we're actually that good at doing, but it really does make a difference when it's done properly. Like you can create really smooth movements. Yeah, and then it's editing it into a sequence and then preparing that to bring into the gaming engine.
So also with the animation score, what's really important is to like, so for example, if you're going to be doing the animation, you basically kind of like similar to a storyboard, you need to like literally lay out and have a document which lays out every single animation you're going to create. And you need to be really methodical with this stage to get it like really accurate. I think again, it's like what level you're doing, but if you're doing it with like high fidelity characters that move fairly realistically, or even it's not even that it moves super realistically, it's literally if it's a sequence of events, you need to, or you're making some short film or a longer film, you have to create really methodical lists for the animation score, and tick it off very like orderly to be able to like just make the process a bit smoother.
Yeah.
So for example, with the body, face and hand motion capture, often you're having to like unless you have a full body suit that has the hands on it as well, and you're doing it at a studio with the face rig, you're going to have to combine them all together, which is like can be just like a bit tedious.
But so the next stage is actually like set dressing, but because we always collaborate when we're doing this, like not one person isn't actually responsible for all of these things. Like I will focus a bit more on the characters and the animation, and Hannah will focus a bit more on the set dressing, for example. So in working together, we're considering the animation score in relation to the set at the same time, because, and I think that that's an important thing to acknowledge, because if you don't do that and you create this animation and then your set is really different, you kind of have to do it again or make things work. So just good to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So then when you're doing the set dressing, it's very much like in a film production where you're like, okay, now you've got everybody's like the cameras, people are there, like the actors are about to come in, we need to set up the space, you've only got 2 days to it. But this is great because you don't have 2 days to do it. You can, well, you might do, because you might be, you might have your deadline, but you, but you like basically like what it is just like literally putting everything together. So and then so that we know everything is set up ready to film. So it's the character setup, the animation setup. So you want to make sure the animation doesn't like go into a rock. So you want to making sure everything, you want to test out the sequences and making sure that everything kind of fits all together as one thing. And then the lighting setup too. Then you go on to the cinematics. So the cinematics is there's a camera setup. So the camera setup has the settings, color grading, aperture, focal length, and manual focus distance. So this is like, again, which actually we have talked about it throughout, but it is, again, this is all for Unreal Engine. You can do this in Unity. It will be much harder in Unity. In Unreal, it will be much easier, unless you know how to use Unity. For sure, Unreal will make it 100 times easier, this setup.
Yeah.
And you can do it across different platforms, the same thing, that you can apply this to anything, but it is more tailored for Unreal Engine. So for example, you could do it in Cinema 4D as well. Then you have like the sequence, so you have your camera setup, you have the sequencing, you have the editing and the sequencing, the post-processing, the exporting and the rendering. So with the sequencing, you're often sequencing the characters, objects, the sky and the weather, or any particle system. So the other is like any sort of effects that you want that are inside the gaming engine. One thing that to be conscientious of is just that if you're creating some sort of scene, and you just be careful of this sky dynamics, because if you want it to change from one set to another set, you need to consider what time of day it is, or like how time changes or weather changes. Then yeah, you can actually edit within the sequencer. So that's one thing that you can do. So you don't even have to it's not just editing within say Premiere or something, it's also editing within the sequencer. Then there's the post-processing, which can be the lens effect and camera effect, exporting, rendering. Then you go on to the post, which again is like video editing, color grading, special effects. That's probably something like Premiere or Final Cut Pro. And then there's the typography design. If you might work with some HUD design as well, because you're using gaming engines, it's like often like the aesthetically people do lots of HUD designs.
We tend to work in like After Effects for those things, and also for the title and intro and credits and things. So that kind of is another package that kind of ties everything together at the end, and finally it gets to sound design and score. And also, I mean, like first, it's really important when we create something really cinematic that it feels really immersive as well. So having like Foley or really well done sound design is like essential to like carrying the visuals that we've just made, I think.
And also the Foley is important if you want to make things, so like even like how the sound, like, so when we work with sound design, it's like, how does this, like, what sort of environment is it? So how does the sound actually travel within that space? Or like, what would, like, for example, if you're in a desert, like, how would that sound actually travel? So there's certain things like this, again, with like character design, the thing that you can compensate is the sound. Like the sound can really make, you can create the sound to be like much more layered rather than the character design, so that it gives off the effect or the motive feeling. And then it's the exporting. Once you've done the exporting, you have a CG.
So I thought what I'd show you guys first is kind of what we're aiming to get to at the end of this session. And I think we mentioned at the beginning that there will be like a practical activity which we'll do together, but that will be entirely browser based. And then the rest of the session, if you have the wherewithal with your computer, with the software downloaded, you can follow along with me. But we don't expect you to do that, because we know it can be very like jarring sometimes doing this kind of thing online with lots of people at the same time. So I'll share the process and teach you how to do it, and we'll provide you with a demo project and a step-by-step plan of like how to do it in your own time. So hopefully that will be like adequate. So to start with, I just wanted to show you like just a little clip of like, like the final outcome. So this is like an animated character from Metahumans that we worked on yesterday. So we kind of put it together, and then I did some facial animation and put it up in a simple scene and sequenced it. So I'll play it now. So yeah, the quality is really like, hopefully you can see over screen share that the quality is actually really, really good for something that we put together really quickly. And also, like, you know, this sequencing, it's really simple to do, and it's really simple to play around with the aperture and the focus to kind of create like a very cinematic kind of short film. So that's what we're aiming to do first. And now I'll share this document with you. I'm actually going to share this whole folder with you now, which has a demo project. So that's the exact same project that I'm working in right now with everything already set up. And then there's also this document, which is step-by-step instructions. I've put in screenshots to help illustrate things. But because there's like a lot of screenshots, it looks like there's like 23 pages, but there isn't like 23 pages of instructions. There's just like a lot of pictures. So don't be overwhelmed. So first off, I think Ava shared all of this information maybe before everyone joined the workshop today, and also in the chat. But what we're going to be doing, like the software and the software, the plugins and the apps that we're going to be working with are, firstly, of course, there'll be Unreal Engine. So with Unreal Engine, you'll need to create an Epic Games account if you haven't already. You'll then be able to sign up for access to use Metahumans. So the link for that is here. And then there's a link to actually access the Metahumans Creator app. So the first link is just Epic Games, and here you can you'll be able to get Epic Games, so you'll be able to download the Epic Games launcher, and it comes with the marketplace and everything. And you'll also be able to create an Epic Games account here. Then on the second link, which is linked for signing up for access, just on this page, I think if you scroll down, it says, yeah, request early access, or you might even be able to just go in directly from launching the app, but you will need an account to get started with that. And that account is quite important, because once you've downloaded Unreal Engine, we'll actually then also be using the software called Bridge. So Bridge is it's a really great software where you can really easily import high quality free mega scans, which are kind of textures and images that you can use for materials in Unreal to create again really high quality materials. So that's a really useful tool. And Bridge has Metahumans inbuilt, so that's how we build the Metahumans in the browser-based software, and then we you open up the Bridge once it's downloaded, you log in with your account, and then you can import the Metahuman directly from there. And then finally, we'll be using a bunch of plugins inside of Unreal, which so there's a few which are for Windows only, which is I was mentioning earlier, the facial animation is kind of at the moment only available on Windows, but at least if you don't have Windows today, at least you can kind of understand the process and maybe see if it's something that you want to try. You can kind of see how easy it is, and maybe if it is, then find a friend who's got a PC you can borrow for a bit. So those plugins are the iClone Live-Link, the ARKit plugins, and then the last one is for Mac and PC, and that's the HDRI backdrop, which just allows us to create basically a 3D environment really quickly. So this is a HDRI. It's just a cube map that's mapped onto a 360 sphere, for example, and it just means that you don't have to create a world straight away. We've actually got a template to work in. And then finally, it's the Live Link Face app, which is for recording the facial animation, and currently that's for iPhone X and above only. But there's a link there to download if you guys want to right now. So the first exercise that we thought we'd start with is actually creating a metahuman. So you guys can follow along with this, and we were thinking that seeing as it's browser based and like we've been talking for ages as well, maybe just to like have a bit of a break and also kind of like activate your mind again, we'll just have a play around. Like I'll screen share while I'm making a character. Maybe if you guys want to, you can make a character on your end at the same time. So I'll load that up, and if anyone has any questions or any problems creating an account, just let me know, like write a message in the chat, and if I don't see it, Hannah, maybe we can keep an eye out.
Yeah.
So I'm of course already logged in. When Metahumans in the browser finally opens, you'll see that, I mean, like these are some characters that I've made or played around with, but if you haven't made any, it probably will just come up directly with create metahuman. So you can either go directly into editing one of the ones you previously worked in, or you can click create metahuman to start again. And the way it works is Metahuman has a bunch of different like ready-made presets and of characters, and you can kind of start with them, choose one, and then, but don't worry because you won't be limited to having a character that looks exactly like that. It's just a starting point, and actually they have some really powerful tools for like blending and sculpting and like changing the features individually. So I'm just going to choose one to start with. I might just go for the one that's already selected. So I'm just going to click next. So when it first opens, you'll get to see the character. There's a short animation clip that you can play kind of at all times, or you can stop it and then it will go into kind of like a generic pose where you'll get to, and when you've stopped it, that's when you'll actually be able to start sculpting it. So there are some kind of like, this is really useful, the hotkey references over here. So that's just like shortcuts which tell you how to interact. So for example, you can like, you can orbit the space by holding your right mouse button and rotating. You can pan by pressing the middle mouse button. And zoom is obviously just a scroll wheel, things like that. It's quite easy. It's really easy to pick up. So I think what we'll start with is I'll just show you how you can like blend the face. So I think this is like a really interesting way that they've done this like interface of being able to blend between different characters. It means that you can, I mean, there are actually quite a lot of different styles of faces they've got here, but then in terms of actually like sculpting, like we were saying, if you wanted to do more non-human sculpting or sculpting like in ZBrush, for example, where you can be a lot more fluid, that's not really possible. But I do think that this is a really like great interface, and it's really easy to use. So you can just like take another character, for example, this one, and you just kind of drop it into this like, I guess these little tiny portals. So maybe you take different face styles. I'll just do a few so you can see. And what it does is it will blend the features. It won't change like the skin color or the hair or anything. It will just be adapting the features. So you can see right now I have like 6 faces to blend from. And now if I'm in the viewport here, you can see there are these kind of like little circles with dots, and when you hover over them, you can kind of like, I'll click that and hold it, and then you can see it creates the same kind of shape as the interface in the top right hand corner. And I don't know, I guess you guys can see that it's changing as I kind of like approach the different circles, and it will blend between them. So it's really fun to play around with. Like, I don't know if you guys have this set up on your end. Like, just feel free to like play and listen while I'm talking, because I really love the fluidity of this though, because it's really dynamic, and it's really quite responsive to your mouse movements. Which, like I was saying earlier, we actually don't use Metahumans in our projects, because we're normally working in Character Creator, and inside Character Creator, you can do a lot more. Like, you're not confined to certain limitations like you are with Metahumans, but the actual process of like changing the shape of the eyebrows, it's really not as dynamic or intuitive. So I think that they've done a really good job. Okay, so maybe what I'll do is, now that I've kind of shown you how to do the blending, I'll show you how to do the sculpting. So you can stay in blend mode, but you just come down to here. And if we select sculpt, you can see that it changes from having kind of like a few large points. We've actually now got many smaller points. And it's a similar process. You just select one and you can just kind of like outwardly change you can pull it in all directions, like up, down, in and right, left and right, and it will move dynamically with you. So this is also a really easy way to just like actually have a bit more control, because if you're working with the blending mode, you're actually only going between a certain number of shapes of faces, whereas you have a bit more flexibility here to actually independently move certain aspects and like change the angle of them. The other thing that you can do is, like, right now I have my symmetry turned on, but you can turn it off easily by coming down here and just clicking it, and it turns it off. So you can see now then that if I change the right hand nostril, it is moving the left one a little bit, but it's not moving it to the same extent as the right one. So to turn it back on, you just click there and you just go back to average. So I really think that that's like something that can be really fun to play with, because you can create like a very kind of sterile, really realistic looking human, but when you're working with the symmetry turned off, you can actually kind of create more realistic faces, I think. But it's good to kind of start with the symmetry turned on, because then you can do the basis and then you can go into the finer details like a bit later on, for example. The other thing I wanted to show you guys is that, so I was just doing that in the sculpt mode, but there's also another one which is kind of fun. You can go into move mode, and you can see it changes from points to like sections, or these kind of like lines, and you just like pull and grab, and you can see as you move your mouse, it kind of like changes things. So you can take a bit of time to just kind of like get to grips with how they actually move, but I think it's like quite fun to play around with. I mean, me and Hannah were doing it last night while we were on call with one another, and I think we spent like a really long time just kind of quietly playing around, and yeah, it's quite fun. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the eyes. So again, I was like, oh, like you can't even choose like the individual color, like, because in iClone you can, or Character Creator, sorry, you can just pick any color on the spectrum. But with this, you have a few presets, and then there is some kind of like changing that you can do. So for example, I'm going to click that greeny brown one because I think it's a bit nicer having that kind of two-tone color. And then if you click on, that's in the presets, but then if you click in iris, you can actually, you have a little bit more flexibility. So what I did with the character that I've got in Unreal that's in the project that you guys have already got is I actually selected the eyes individually just so I could create something that maybe looks a bit more interesting. So I might keep the right eye the same as it is right now, but then with the left eye, I might just kind of change the colors. So I maybe will go for something like quite a light blue in the center, and maybe I'll go for something a bit greener or darker around the edges. I suppose we like to quite make things quite non-human and quite surreal. So I guess just playing around with that is is just like up to you and your aesthetic and what you're aiming for. You can also change the patterns inside. I think probably because I'm screen sharing and I'm on Zoom at the same time, my internet isn't the best, and you'll notice that the Metahuman browser, like depending on how fast your internet is, it will kind of show you, like it might be more pixelated at times. But yeah, you can kind of change those patterns and you can kind of see it changing a little bit. And that's something that you'll really be able to pay attention to in Unreal in the camera sequencer. So that's just a bit of eyes. You can also adjust like the brightness of the whites of the eyes, kind of adjust some of the rotations of the veins, basically. But yeah, you can play around with that. I'm going to leave it like that for now. I think I'm happy with that. And then the teeth, this is something that I think is quite interesting that they've done. They've given you a lot of flexibility with like editing the teeth, which I think is interesting that that was more of a priority than the body types. But you can, there we go. You can adjust this slider just to open the mouth a bit so you can see a bit better. She looks a bit freaky right now. But you can change this one and you'll notice it kind of like goes from being like maybe quite a straight teeth to kind of a bit more wonky or different kind of shaped teeth as well. So that's quite nice. You can adjust the length of the teeth. You can adjust how dirty they are. And then you can also slightly change the colors, but to be honest with you, the preset is kind of fine. You don't need to, I mean, feel free to play around as much as you want, but I won't go into too much detail now. And you can also use these sliders to just drag up or drag left and right to slightly change things. So feel free to do that as you like. And then the next section is the makeup. So I'm actually going to come off of, you can see I'm still in move mode. So I'm actually going to go into preview mode now, which makes that interface disappear. So it's just a bit easier for me to see what I'm playing with here. So this character already has this preset makeup on, so you can remove it entirely to have a more natural face, or you can kind of select one of the other ones. And to begin with, they look like quite typical makeup looks, but you can actually kind of play around with them quite quickly and like come up with something a bit more different. So this one, you can see that the color of the shadow is actually a black, but we can, I don't know, we can change that to something else, and then you can adjust the transparency, which will change how, it will just change how like thick it looks really. I really like to play with the roughness, and I like to put it down to 0 because it makes it shiny, which is just something that I like the look of. The same with the metallic, that can kind of, you can play around with that to change how shiny or how reflective it is really. I might keep that at 1 actually. And that's a bit intense, so I might go for maybe which was the one I was using before. It was the maybe this one, the Panda Smudge, and I think that green's a bit much. So I mean, I did on the other character, I did like quite a like goldy yellow, but I might do something a bit different this time. Let's see, maybe a bit more silvery this time. But yeah, so you can play around with all those settings. You can see again, there is a limitation, but you can also achieve something quite interesting, I think. And then in terms of the lips, I'd say that this is a little like, doesn't always look the best either, but you can, there is more flexibility. You can have a, there isn't like 7 colors to choose from. You can actually go for something more more dynamic. So again, I kind of quite like it with quite a bit of roughness to make it quite shiny, and maybe just a bit more transparency. So yeah, I think I'll stick with that for now, just so I can move on. Oh, I've just seen some messages in the chat. Oh, can you do under and overbite? I actually think you can. Yeah. So if you go to teeth, so it like makes her mouth pop open straight away. One of these icons will be able to do that. So if you do like the lower shift, actually that shifts the direction. I think it's
I know how you can do it.
overbite. There we go. It's that one. So if I rotate, maybe we can see a bit better.
Another good way to visually make it look like you have an overbite is, Tan, if you go into, I think when you go into sculpt, you can also just position the, you can actually change the positioning of the draw and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like visualization of it for the actual face shape.
So if I go back to just blend and go into, I'll just try and move, and then you can kind of like pull the mouth out, like Hannah's saying, yeah, and the chin as well. And with the sculpt, you'll be able to like play around with the little points, and actually it's good to, I think, yeah, it's good to kind of move around in 360 while you're doing it, because then you'll get a feel of how the whole head is looking, because actually you'll notice that there are these little points in the head. So I was going to get to this next anyway, so which is the hair. So there's a whole section for hair here, and there are only preset hairstyles that you can choose from. But like Hannah was saying, these are really, really well built, and they look really realistic, which is, for building characters, like so rare to find. And they're also, if you're working in a PC, they are dynamic. So if you animate the character and the head is moving, the hair will sway with it. So even though you can't really do the hairstyling yourself, you do have a lot of like room for creating something that looks really good. But if I just turn the hair off for now, I think it's still in there. You can see the points on the head. You can actually even sculpt the position of the head however you like, to a certain degree as well. So that's quite a good good tip, just to remember to rotate around your character. So I might just choose, I might maybe keep the same hair that was before. You're a bit limited to some extent. You can go kind of like all white, which actually, if you go all white, you lose the realism in the detail, I think. So it's quite good to either stay within the natural colors. But what's quite nice as well is you can adjust the salt and pepper slider, which is basically how much grey hair you have. This one looks like a snow princess. Yeah, so I'll just leave it like that for now, just so you can get an idea. But yeah, you can change the hairstyle. There's quite a few different things. Oh, you had this one yesterday, Hannah, which looked good. It's quite an interesting hairstyle.
Which one? That one?
The one with the two buns?
Yeah, I like that one. That was nice.
Yeah. We
can maybe show all the different characters we make, so I can share my screen.
Yeah, you can share your screen and show them. That's a really nice idea. Maybe we can do that. Oh, actually, I'll just briefly explain the other ones, and then maybe we can do that so people can have a look at the kind of thing you can do if you spend a bit more time with it. So then you can just change the type of eyebrows. In this panel, again, you can change the roughness, maybe how much grey hair there is, or you can have no eyebrows whatsoever. But that's really up to you. Same with the eyelashes. There's a few presets, and again, similar settings, just roughness and salt and pepper. And it's pretty good. They actually have a lot of like beard options, so it works. They've separated it into moustache and beard, so you kind of do one section first, and then you add the beard, but it means you can kind of play around with the different types of beard. And the other thing I forgot to show you is the tab, which is called skin. So I'm going to go in quite close so you can see the details. But if I just like drag along this slider, you can see that the type of skin is changing quite a lot. So some of them are quite like the skin feels quite rough. There's more freckles. There's maybe more redness. Maybe there's more wrinkles. I really love some of the wrinkly ones just because they feel really kind of, I don't know, I just really like to see the detail in it actually. And then you can also adjust the contrast and the roughness of the skin too. Sometimes having the skin quite rough, like with the roughness value of 0, means that it just has this nice kind of like glowy reflection in different lighting situations. So I quite like to do that too. You can play around with the freckles. Like I think when you immediately click on them, they look a bit, they don't look very well blended with the skin. So you just need to adjust the settings, maybe change the density, change the strength, also the saturation, and you can kind of adjust the color to match the skin a bit better. So yeah, don't be afraid to play around with them until you kind of get something that looks a bit more realistic. And then I really like this section as well, because it means that, I mean, this is where the realism really comes into play, because you can select different parts of the face. So just like the under eye or the chin, for example, or maybe I'll do the under eye, it might be a bit more obvious, but you can adjust like the redness or the saturation. I think because I've got makeup, you can't see it so clearly. Let's try the cheeks. But yeah, you can kind of create like different kind of coloring on the face, which I think is really nice, because it means that, again, it doesn't look like just a preset thing. You can kind of make it look like quite weathered or yeah, quite yeah, just different. And then finally, so those are the main sections, and then you've got the body. So again, like I was saying before, you can just change the body type, which is, yeah, not that, there's not a lot that you can switch between. And the clothing is quite, yeah, you've got like a jumper, a hoodie, and a shirt for all bodies. And bottoms, there's a few more options, but they're not really that, there's not much room for flexibility. I think they've just randomized the color. But yeah, you can kind of choose however. They've got like a primary and a secondary color, so there is like a bit of detail that you can play around with depending on what works for your character. And then there's different shoes to play around with. So as you can see, there's a lot that you can do with within its limitations. But then I would say, like, I can't remember who it was who asked before, but I would say like the body types and below the head is where you'll maybe get the characters looking really similar, but the faces and the hairstyles and the kind of the contours of the face is where you can really create something quite different. I don't know if Hannah, maybe you want to screen share quickly some of the ones you made yesterday, just because they're quite nice to see the variation in what you can do.
So this is Maria, which is, so you can just see her, I'll show you her like, oh, there. You can see, just a second, it's quite fuzzy. Maybe if I pause. So there's Maria, Zen, and this is Coda, because I'm going to show you the create materials, so then you can see create metahumans, so you can see what they originally look like. And so Coda drew this, then, so that was one of the characters. Then this is Maria. You can see here, that's Maria. This is Zen.
Yeah, so you can really see how like quite different Hannah's results are compared to what she started with.
Another thing that is interesting to just like raise, it's like basically what you're doing is you're like playing with the genetics and then altering it, but digitally, and you're also like, you kind of like genetically mix and matching, digitally genetically mix and matching. But obviously like the thing with this metahuman, this is like, what is good about learning this is they will release like something better than this. Like this is to get people interested in it. So when they release it as something like more, I'm sure a lot of the frameworks will be
more developed and more intricate. I really believe that.
And also with Unreal, like what's really amazing about Unreal is like they have a lot of, because they have a lot of money, and because they do have like a very much like they have like a mega grant, so they invest a lot in like plugins, so there's and they really believe in like connecting all the softwares to each one another, whereas like say Facebook has like lots of like, I know it's not a software, but they do work with like Quest and Spark AR, but they don't like cross platforming, like doing things cross-platform to other companies. So what's it's enabled Unreal to like have so many potential pipelines that you can work with. That's why the metahuman we think is really valuable, because even if like at the moment you might just be doing you might just be having it so that the character is speaking and saying something, and then it's just like a nice background, it's maybe from head up. Maybe in the future you can have it so that you know, it will, because now you know this, it will just help you with the other stages of things, basically, and with when it has updates, which updates tend to be fairly fast.
Yeah, I'm going to carry on screen sharing now, because now I'm going to show you how you go from building your metahuman in the browser to bringing it into Unreal. So once you've made your metahuman, the next stage is actually like bringing it into Unreal. And so that's where using the software bridge comes into play. So bridge is it literally is a bridge. It's a bridge between metahumans and Unreal. And also like this other, you can go on their website, which I've linked. You can go directly to their mega scans, and they have a bunch of free materials that you can download that are really high fidelity as well. So in Bridge, I'm going to kind of like demonstrate this, but I don't expect anyone to follow along because it does require you to have everything installed. But what I'll do is I'll explain it, and you guys will have this document, so you'll be able to kind of, hopefully, when you come back to doing it again in your own time, you'll be familiar with the process anyway, because I've explained it. But yeah, just let me know if you have any questions or interrupt me at any time. It's completely fine. So yeah, the next step is you actually have to download Bridge. And once you've got that installed, you have to log in. So when you open Bridge, it will probably look something like this. And there'll be this icon here, which I'm already signed in, but you just need to sign in with the account that you use to create with your Epic Games account, basically. And it's really important that you log in with your Epic Games account, because otherwise you won't be able to find your metahumans. They'll be lost in the metaverse somewhere. So then once you've logged in and you're all set up in Bridge, the next thing that you do is you just come down to this icon here, which is just the metahumans icon, and it will open like a sub menu, and you can either use one of their preset characters directly, or you can click on my metahumans, and then you'll be able to see the characters that you've made. So I was working in this earlier and I hadn't made this character and it's just popped up. So it is really immediate. Like if you make a new character now, it's going to pop up like directly. So to download a character or like bring it into Unreal, what you need to do is you need to select the one that you're working with. And when you select it, it will open up this menu here. I actually always work with the pre-default settings, but you can adjust the resolution. So like I would go with 8K just because you will get the detail that looks really like a metahuman. But if you're working on a small project, or maybe your computer's doesn't have the best processing power, you can go for 1K or 2K resolution and they'll still look good. It just won't be like super crisp. So I stay with the default settings, and all I do is you just click download, and you'll see that it starts to say generating. It can take, I mean, for me, it can take like 20 minutes to generate it, and then like another 10 minutes or so to actually download it, because it's such a like richly detailed asset that it just has to spend a bit of time like kind of compiling it all together. So I'm actually, because I've already downloaded one and exported one, I'm going to cancel this just in case my computer gets overwhelmed, and also just because we won't have time to wait for it. So I'm going to cancel that now, and let's just imagine that I've generated and downloaded this character, which is the character that I already have set up. So once you have your character set up, the next stage is to actually open an Unreal project, and then you'll be able to export it directly. So if you're not familiar with Unreal, the way that you create a new project is you have to open the Epic Games launcher. So I always have that in my what's my bottom bar here, so it's really easy to access. So when you open it, it will open up this little kind of small browser, and you just click directly on launch Unreal Engine 4.26. By the way, I'm explaining things quickly, but it is really detailed here. Like, you'll be able to read all the instructions, and you'll see the screenshots with little arrows that kind of tell you exactly what to do. So also don't feel like you have to make like tons of notes, because it is already kind of prepared for you. So yeah, so Unreal can sometimes take a bit of time to launch for me. But there we go, it says it's launching now, and what it should do is it will open up, yeah, here we go. It will open up the engine, and it will load with like a starting screen where I can either open a project that I've already made, an existing one, or I can create an altogether new one. So I'll just show you how to create a new one, just so you guys have seen the process. So what you do is, yeah, so either select or create a new project. So to create a new project, you just select games, and then you click next. Always just click blank template. Like, these other things can be useful, but for what we're doing, a blank template is perfectly fine. So then you click next, and then you can either choose to build it with the starter content. So that's just a bunch of assets that will come with the project. So you might have some floors, you might have some walls, like some chairs and tables, like some really basic assets, like, and quite a lot of materials actually, which if you're new to Unreal, like, I always build it with the starter content, because sometimes you can just take something that's existing and tailor it to your own needs. But if you don't want to, you just click here and click no starter content. Then you can navigate to somewhere in your hard drive or on your computer to save it. So I'm just going to save it in the same folder as before. And then you can rename it. So just like my project one is fine, or like maybe Metahuman test or something, whatever it needs to be. So then you just click create project, and a new project should be loading. So you'll be able to close this window and close that window. And if I go to my desktop, let me see. You'll see, yeah, you'll see that it's loading. So it's generating a new project for me now. So that should be quite quick, because there's not much going on there. And when that's done, I'll show you what to do in terms of bringing in the character, which again, that can take a couple of minutes, or maybe 5-10 minutes. So rather than us kind of waiting and watching that, because I've already done that, I'll just explain the process, and then I'll skip over the waiting time and go into the project that we're already working, that I've already set up, because it will just be faster and less boring. So this is what Unreal looks like when you have a brand new project. So I'll just briefly explain the interface. You have the content browser, which is where you'll find all your assets, like because we imported it with the starter content, there'll be architecture, audio, materials, particles, just a bunch of things that I won't go into further detail. Then in the top right-hand corner, sorry, you have the world outliner, which is actually where you can select the assets that are in your level. And so obviously this window is your level. You can use your mouse, left and right and middle mouse buttons to navigate. And then you have the place actors, which is quite useful. So now you've got your project set up. You have Bridge installed and you've downloaded your character. You just need to export it. So to do that, you just click on export and it will automatically start the export process. So that can take a little bit of time just to connect and just to kind of like get working properly. But what will happen is eventually there'll be a loading bar that comes up and it will import everything exactly as you need it to be. And because the Metahumans use several features which are not, they're a bit more process heavy, you have to enable some inbuilt plugins. And those plugins, there'll be a notification that just pops up similar to this one that just says like, so this one says manage plugins or dismiss. But once your Metahuman has imported, it will come in with something that says like enable plugins, and you just need to click that and it will restart your project. And then you will, then you'll be ready to get started with actually setting up your project. So I hope that makes sense so far. If you have any questions, again, just let me know. I'm actually going to close this project and now I'm going to show you in the existing project that I already have, the plugins that you need to be set up with. So I'll scroll down because we've gone over this. So yeah, so the next plugins that I need to enable are the ARKit plugins and also the HDRI plugin. So the ARKit plugins enable me to connect to the iClone Live link, not like the Unreal Live face link. And what that does is that enables you to do the live facial animation. So they're really 3 essential plugins. And then it's not essential, but I think it's quite nice. Oh, it's crashed. I'm just going to restart that. So it's not essential, but the HDRI plugin I think is a really nice feature that allows you to create a scene. You don't have to build any assets. You can just take a free image from online to create an environment. So that's really useful if you just want to kind of test something or get to the end of this workshop, the kind of process, and actually kind of render something out that feels quite finished. So when my project reopens, I think it's likely crashed because I've had it open for quite a few hours now and been on Zoom, so, and this laptop's a little bit old, but hopefully that shouldn't happen for you. Yeah, so in terms of, while that loads, I'll just talk a bit more about the HDRIs. So the HDRIs, like I said, they're these kind of they're these kind of cube maps, and there's this really great website that I've linked in the PDF here, where you can download honestly hundreds of them, and they just create like small, it's almost like being inside of a globe and the image is projected onto the globe behind you. And the cool thing about the HDRI plugin is that it actually kind of maps some of the lighting that is reflected in the image. So I'll show you that in a minute. Cool, so now we have this open. I will show you the plugins and how you install them. It's just in the settings and then plugins. And all you do is you come up to the search bar and you just search for ARKit.
And I've already got them enabled because this project is already set up, but they'll be unticked. So you just, actually, I'm just not going to untick it so I don't change anything, but you just tick them to enable them. And then again, you just search for HDRI and enable it. And I don't know why Unreal does this, but once you install a plugin, you always have to reinstall, like restart the project, because that means that it just like activates the plugin basically. So once you've done that, you will have like this is the level that I've already created, but I'm actually going to create a new level so that we can start from scratch, and I'll explain how you place the character in, how you place the HDRI in, and then we'll get to the animation. So with new level, I'm just going to select the default, and then once your Metahumans have imported, there'll be a folder called Metahumans, and common is like just a bunch of assets you just don't need to touch, they'll just be there. And then Keiken was the name of the character that I was using. So all you do is you open up that folder and then you find this thing called BP Keiken. It should be the only asset that's not in a folder in the root folder of Keiken. And what it is that this is a blueprint. So that means that it's all set up for you, and it should be quite like straightforward now. So you just drag it and drop it into the scene. So then I'll just rotate around so you can see it a bit more. There we go. And I kind of, to be honest with you, what I like to do just to make sure it's really organized is I'm going to delete this floor because I'm going to use a 360 map, so I don't need it. I don't need the player start. Like, this is something that I always find really annoying, because when you go into the simulation mode, it always loads you up in a weird place. So you can just delete that. And then I sometimes just make folders just to make things a bit easier. So I'll just do like environment, for example, and I'm going to pop in the atmospheric fog. So that's an environmental thing. The sky sphere, which we can probably delete in a minute, the light source, and then also the skylight and the sphere reflection capture. You don't need to know too much about what they are. They just always come in with the default level. And then we're left with the BP Keiken. So if I select that and press this plus button here, it will create a new folder. And I'm just going to call the folder like character, for example. And it just means that like as you start to work on more complex projects, like you can really easily have hundreds of assets in your scene, and it just helps to kind of like have good practice with keeping that organized, I think. Cool. And then, so now we want to add our HDRI. So in order to do that, we need to come up here to place actors, and you'll just search for HDRI backdrop. And this is another blueprint, so it means that everything's kind of already automated for you. You just drag and drop it into the scene. And so this is like the preset image that it comes with, which isn't so exciting. But what you do is you can just use the pivot point here, just to kind of like, maybe you want to center it underneath the character. You might want to make sure that the floor is the same level as the feet, so you can just kind of pull that up. You can see I've gone too high there, so maybe something like that is quite good. And then, so now I'm going to kind of show you, in the project file that I'll send you guys, or that you have access into in that drive folder, there's a folder that I've made called HDRI, where I've already actually downloaded several HDRI images and imported them. But I'll just run you through that process because it's super simple. You just come to this link, which I've linked in the PDF, select one, choose your settings. I think 4K is pretty good. Make sure it's on HDR, and then click download, and it will download automatically. So then to change the background in Unreal, you just make sure you've got your HDRI backdrop selected. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Make sure you've selected the details panel. And then you'll see underneath HDRI backdrop, there's this cube map property. And you can just change it by dragging one of these images. That one's not so good actually, but you can kind of see it creates different worlds. So that's really easy. And there's also a few that come preset with Unreal, so feel free to play around with that. But to import your own image, like the one you've just downloaded from HDRI and Haven, you'll find it in your download. So all you need to do is just literally just drag and drop it, and then you'll see this will load up. It might take a couple of seconds. There we go. And again, just drag and drop to change it. So can you see now that I've dragged and dropped that, it's actually a bit blurry. There's a really tiny trick that you can do just to kind of maintain the quality. So you just double click it to open it. 1 second, and it will open up the properties. And you just scroll down here to the MIP gen settings, and you change it from texture group to no MIP maps, which hang on a sec. There we go, no MIP maps. And then you just click save. And when I close out of this, you can see that it's gone from being actually quite blurry to being more in detail now. Yeah, I'm just going to keep this one for now. So now we've done this, we've basically set up our level and we're ready to start doing the facial animation. So to set up your the facial animation, you'll need to have your iPhone ready with the app already installed. So that's the LiveLink Face app, which it's linked in the document, so you'll be able to find it quite quickly. So in order to set it up, you need to know what the IP address of your laptop is, and both your laptop and your phone need to be connected to the same Wi-Fi. So to find your IP address, you just open up the command prompt and you just type in IP config. And when you press enter, it will come up with a bunch of details. But the one we need to remember is the IPv4 address. And that's what we need to, once you've opened the LiveLink app on your phone, you just go to the settings and you plug in that address underneath LiveLink, and you select add target, and then you type in the IP address. I've put the instructions for this in the document, and I think there's some phone screenshots that I'll upload and put in the document so you guys can see exactly how to do it. I'll just jump ahead a bit so I don't spend too long explaining like the pernickety bits, but that's basically it. So once you've done that and you've got your LiveLink set up with the same IP address as your computer, you can close this, and then you can open the folder with the character and select your character. Then in the default panel, you'll see this LiveLink LL-Link face object, and underneath it, it says LL-Link face head. And we should be able to just see my phone. It should just connect. If you look over here, can you see it says Florentine's iPhone? So that's the iPhone that I'm connected to. So you make sure that it says that. And you also make sure that you enable LiveLink face head, because that will animate the neck movements as well. So you'll get quite a human animation. I can just go through the step-by-step instructions. And I know because it's been crashing, it maybe looks more complicated than it is, but when I go through these instructions, I think you'll see it is just a number of just like ticking some boxes. Okay, so this is where we were.
imagine that this is what I was doing just now. I'd selected the BP Keiken, which is essentially the blueprint of the metahuman character. So in order to then like activate the facial animation, what you need to do is you'll just come up to here where it says play, and then you right click play, and there's a little button that says simulate. And when you press simulate, as soon as you press simulate, it will connect to the facial animation. To record it so that you can actually sequence something, you can have a recorded animation clip that you can then sequence and then render out as like a final film almost. You have to come up to where it says window, and then it will say cinematics and then tape recorder. And you click on tape recorder, and that opens up a completely new window. And what you do from there is in the world outliner, you drag and drop the BP Keiken, so that's the blueprint of the character. You drag and drop it into the source. And that's the next thing you need to do is you need to go into simulation mode. Double check that your facial animation is working. So that's how you see whether it's working. You press play, it will simulate, and then the face will start moving with your face. And if that's all working correctly, then you just press, so that's, sometimes if you open the tape recorder, it will come up with this, like some of the buttons in the toolbar will be missing. So you just press that right click arrow to find it. Then once you click play, you just press the big red button to record, and it will show you that it's recording. So it will come up with this like 3, 2, 1, and like kind of like old school cinema style. So then you can like do your facial animation. Maybe you want to talk, maybe you just want to do like idle looking around. Even something really simple can look really beautiful and effective. So record for however long you like, and then you can just press this button in the top corner, which is stop. So once you press stop, it will come up with this like loading bar, and that will just be, that's basically loading the assets that you've just created. So you've created several animation assets for the body and the face, and then it will also create a sequence that's already set up for you, so you actually don't have to reconnect anything. So yeah, once it's saved, what you need to do is you will just go back to your content browser, which is over here, just over here. It's like where all the assets in your project file are. And you need to select cinematics, which will be a new folder that's created when you take the facial animation recording. And it saves it in takes, and then it saves it in a folder with the date in which it was recorded. And then so you'll have like take 1, take 2, take 3 for however many takes you want. So you need to collect, so the scene that I was working in was actually the 3rd take I took. So you just need to click the sub-scene folder, and there'll be an animation sequence there, and it will likely be called something like BP, the name of your character, scene 1, take 3. So then you just need to double click that to open it. And then there'll be a few things that you need to do before you're ready to actually kind of like create a short film. So once that sequence is opened, you'll notice that there's, this is the timeline here. And over here, it's a bit like in the world outliner, it details the assets that you have in the scene. In the sequencer, in this panel, it details the assets that you have to be sequenced. So that's to add an animation to. So the first thing you'll notice is if you scrub through the timeline, it actually appears that there are 2 characters. And this is because I've done screenshots so you can see this. So at least, even though I can't demo it, at least you have a reference point. So you'll notice that there are 2 blueprints with the same name, except one has this tiny little lightning bolt. And that's because when you open the sequence that has saved from your facial animation recording, it has another blueprint inside of that sequence. So the first thing you'll need to do is actually to hide
the face which isn't animated, which is the original one that doesn't have the lightning bolt. So to do that, you just select the original one. You come down to the sequence set, the details, and just select actor hidden in game in rendering, and that will make it invisible when you render out the footage or play the game. And then to make sure that you can't see it in the level, also you can just toggle visibility by clicking the eye, so you can see where I've got it selected. There just there isn't an eye, it's just like a kind of blank oval. So once you've done that, you'll then be able to like scrub through and you'll see like the character is animating correctly. But once you've got rid of the second body, you'll notice something weird is happening. And this is just a bug in Unreal, and it's really easy to fix. And you just scroll down in the panel of the sequencer, and you'll see that next to body underneath there's like an animation clip, and you just need to delete that, and it will just like reconfigure it, and it should work absolutely perfectly. So that's quite a simple step to fix it. So now what you've got at this point, you'll have your character in the scene, you'll have a simple environment, and you'll have a facial animation. So the next step is, like I was showing you at the very beginning of the demonstration, which seems like years ago now, I showed you that short video clip where it's like the camera kind of panned around the character as they were looking around. Sometimes the focus changed to be more kind of focused on the eyes, and then more overall of the whole face. So that's the next and final stage, is setting up the sequence. So that's what Hana started to explain by pulling in the scene camera actor. You can either do it from the panel, the place actors panel, or you can right click this arrow here, and there's like a little option to select create camera here, and it will create a camera from the point in which you're viewing. So Hana demonstrated this. You can right click the camera to pilot it, and so piloting just means viewing it from the point of view from the camera. It's quite good to be in pilot mode when you're sequencing, because you have a lot more flexibility in terms of what angle you find, because you can move it with the mouse rather than like adjusting like a location value. So it's much easier like that. So Hana was about to show you how you create a new sequence, but what I wanted to say is that you've already got a sequence set up for your facial animation. There's one step I missed that's quite important. I'm really sorry. I'll just go back up. When you open your that sequence, there will be a lock that is actually locked, so you can't actually interact with any of the things on the left-hand side. And you just need to override that by pressing the lock to unlock it, and then you'll be able to like edit things, like for example, get rid of the body animation clip here, and just generally like add the camera to the sequencer so you can sequence it. So once you've done that, which should have been the first thing, you just drag the cinema camera actor and drag it into the sequencer, and it will appear in the panel here. And you'll have those settings such as current aperture, current focal length, and manual focus distance. And so with these, you can adjust the focus and the kind of the depth of view of the camera. So then you'll need to, in order to kind of create your sequence, I'm sure some of you are probably quite familiar with working with keyframes. So you'll need to create keyframes in order to sequence like the movement of the camera. So keyframe, it just like kind of like locks it in one location at one point of time, and then if you do another keyframe, say 10 seconds later, it will move from point A to point B, like keyframe A to keyframe B. And in Unreal, it will automatically do that in quite a smooth motion, which is really good. So then to create a keyframe of the location, you need to press the plus next to transform, and then you can move, then you can scrub along in the timeline maybe in a few seconds and say, oh, I want to position my camera slightly more zoomed in and slightly less in focus. So to do that, you just find your new location, click the plus sign when you found your new location, and then to change the focus, you can change it with the manual focus. So you just need to like adjust that. You can normally click it and drag it to the left or right, and it will adjust it kind of automatically. But what is really useful is that there's this thing called the draw debug focus plane, and that helps you to really, I mean, I think if you're quite familiar with it, you don't really need to use it that much, but if you're first starting out, it's really useful to help you understand like what the boundaries are for getting in and out of focus with the subject in front of the camera. So you can see that it's selected, and at 20 with a manual focus distance of 21, it's quite like it's focusing really on just the main features of the face. So that just gives you a bit of an idea of how to sequence and render. Below, I won't go into detail because I think it's quite straightforward, but below I've also detailed how you can actually render out the footage as either a PNG sequence or an AVI, both of which you can open directly in something like Premiere, and then you'll be able to export it as an MP4 or a MOV. And then you'll have like a little short video that's like really high quality. Hopefully you've got some cool facial animation in there as well, and hopefully you've learned some new things along the way.